In order to do well on the TOEFL, you don't simply need to be good at English, you also need to know how to take clear and effective notes. You are allowed to take notes on the TOEFL. Your test center will give you scratch blank paper to use during the test. If you run out of paper at any time, you may ask a staff member to give you more. At the end of the test, your notes will be collected and destroyed for security purposes. In other words, you may not remove your TOEFL notes from the test center even once you've completed the test. Although you are welcome to take notes on all the TOEFL sections, more than likely you won't need to take any notes during the reading section. And you ask why? Well, this is because each passage given to you stays on the screen as you answer its questions, allowing you to reread the passage as many times as you want. Now, the listening, speaking, and writing sections are a different story. These three sections require unique approaches to TOEFL note taking. We're going to go over some general TOEFL note-taking tips that you can use throughout the exam. On the TOEFL, it's important to use the space on your scratch paper wisely. And one reason is so that you don't have to constantly flip to a new page or turn a page over to continue your notes. You also don't want to have to ask a staff member for additional scratch paper, as this can waste valuable test time, and you don't want to waste any of your test time. So, as you take the TOEFL, try to save as much space as you possibly can on your scratch paper, but in such a way that you're still able to read what you've written and easily make sense of where each note begins and ends. I suggest beginning your TOEFL notes in the top left corner of each page and working your way down as you fill up space. Taking notes in this manner ensures that you won't have tons of extra blank space in the margins and that you aren't overlooking any valuable space you can use. And remember to use both sides of your paper. In addition to saving space, keep your TOEFL notes organized and neat. This way, once you stop taking notes and are answering questions, you'll have no problem deciphering your handwriting and following your train of thought. I find that the best way to organize notes is to write down question numbers. Doing this lets you immediately know which notes correspond to which question on the exam and reduces your risk of confusing your notes for any other questions or prompts. Within your notes, I highly suggest employing lists and charts. For lists, you can use bullet points or numbers to keep track of steps in a process, or points for or against something, or solutions, examples, things of that nature. If there are multiple speakers or sources of information, try drawing a chart with two columns. These columns can be used to summarize what different speakers say, such as in audio clips, or different resources such as a reading passage or a lecture talk about. I have given you an example of a chart. You can make a listening clip centering on a conversation between a student and a professor within the course material. Another tip is to only write down the important details you'll need to know. And you say, well, how am I supposed to decipher what is important and what's not? Well, this is a skill to hone because you'll never have enough time to write down every little detail. In reality, if you're trying to take notes of everything you hear and read on the test, you quickly fall behind and end up just missing important details. So you say, well, what constitutes important ideals? These ideals are usually the overarching topic of a passage or audio clip, the main point of reasons, any key examples or details used to illustrate these points. What important ideals do not encompass or are not irrelevant, or they are insignificant information? Some things such as greetings and filler words like well, things of that nature. For all questions containing audio clips, take care to write down the following pieces of information on your notes: the topic of a conversation or lecture, key points, reasons, and examples, important terminology and phrases, different speakers' opinions, questions, and reactions, any solutions or suggestions, and any decisions made. As for the 6 speaking and 2 writing tasks, make note of the main points and examples you intend to use in your responses. Also, avoid writing full sentences. Use symbols and abbreviations. You should aim to take note concisely and quickly. In short, always avoid writing full sentences. Doing this will only slow you down in the end and result in you having a lot of extra information you don't actually need for answering the questions. So instead of writing down every detailed word, employ an easy to understand system of symbols and abbreviations. Now, I have given you an example of some symbols and abbreviations you could use in your TOEFL notes within the course material. But don't be afraid to come up with some of your own symbols either. Just make sure the symbols and abbreviations you are easy to write, short, and clear in meaning to you. In other words, their meanings don't need to be obvious to nobody else but you, just you. I suggest that you write mostly in English, though you may be tempted to jot down notes in your native tongue. It's generally more convenient to take all your notes in English because then you won't need to waste any time retranslating your notes back into English as you answer the questions. That being said, there may be cases in which it's faster and easier to make a quick note in your own language. While I advise against taking all of your TOEFL notes in a language other than English, if your native tongue uses a word that's significantly shorter than its English equivalent, or if you're struggling to recall a particular English word, it's okay to make a brief note in your own language. Just be sure you're primarily taking notes in English for the sake of clarity and consistency. Last but not least, practice, practice, practice. Practice your TOEFL note-taking skills. The only way to become a better, faster, and more accurate note taker on the TOEFL is to practice, practice, practice. With practice tests, take care to time yourself accordingly. That is, using the time constraints you'll have on the actual exam, in addition to try to recreate the testing environment as closely as possible. This is the key, so that you'll grow more and more accustomed to taking notes under pressure and within certain time limits. Practice, practice, practice. That's the key. Practice.